And judges are currently prosecuting at least 3 major cases against such financial institutions.
At 4 a.m., a quiet suburban street in Georgia exploded into chaos. Flashbang grenades shattered the darkness, armored SWAT vehicles thundered down driveways, and federal agents from the FBI, ICE, and DEA flooded a seemingly ordinary home. They were not there to arrest some small-time dealer. Their target was a cartel fortress, a heavily armed cell tied directly to the Cártel Jalisco Nueva Generación, right in the heart of America's soil. Verified federal documents show among the weapons seized was a grenade launcher. In mere moments, the calm of the neighborhood was replaced by the sudden tension of a battlefield. It was a jarring transformation. 1 second, a devolved, eligible residential setting. The next, a coordinated strike zone. But why did it take such force? And how did this cartel cell manage to set up camp in Georgia? To understand the significance of this raid, the stakes raised, the threats revealed, we must rewind through months of investigations, surveillance, and strategic baiting of network channels. Before we dive deeper, please make sure to subscribe to Military Power for in-depth breakdowns of military operations, global security threats, and behind the scenes of real-world tactics. In the months leading up to the unprecedented raid in Georgia, federal agents from the FBI, DEA, and ICE began noticing a disturbing pattern that quickly evolved into a national security concern. Synthetic opioids, particularly fentanyl, were flooding the southeastern United States at levels never seen before. Data from federal enforcement agencies confirmed a shocking rise. Nationwide fentanyl seizures had surged by more than 1,700% between 2017 and 2023, marking a lethal escalation in America's drug crisis. What made this spike different was its geography. It wasn't centered near the border anymore. It was happening deep in the American heartland, in places that had long seemed insulated from such threats. It was there, in Georgia, that a cluster of suspicious financial activities first caught attention. ICE financial analysts followed the digital trail. Cryptocurrency wallets linked to shell companies, which led them beyond state lines and straight into Mexico. The transactions were small and scattered at first, but the flow of money formed a pattern too deliberate to ignore. Behind the numbers was something far larger, a transnational cartel network operating inside the United States with the same precision it once used along the border. Meanwhile, ground surveillance in an Athens area suburb revealed a curious anomaly. A perfectly ordinary house stood out amid a row of quiet homes. Not because of who lived there, but because of what surrounded it. Agents monitoring the area picked up encrypted radio frequencies similar to those used in military communications. Small cameras were found hidden in streetlights and trees, capturing movements from every angle. To the untrained eye, it was just another suburban residence. To investigators, it was a covert stronghold. This was no longer a street-level drug ring. It was a fortified outpost, a command cell blending into civilian life. Federal agencies began to coordinate on an unusual scale, uniting local police with national intelligence units to map every contact, every signal, every route connected to that house. The deeper they looked, the clearer the picture became. Georgia, once a quiet stop on the nation's map, had become ground zero in a cartel's latest expansion plan. And as the operation moved from surveillance to action, one haunting question kept echoing through the command centers. How could one quiet suburban house in Georgia turn into a fully armed cartel fortress without anyone noticing? The team had been watching that suburban house in Athens for weeks, and as dawn broke, they already knew it was no ordinary residence. Drones hovered silently above, their thermal sensors sweeping over garage roofs and backyards. Hidden cameras mounted on streetlights captured patterns, vehicles arriving at odd hours, men moving items in plain sight, yet acting like shadows. Inside the property, technical teams discovered a private network, routers configured behind locked panels, encrypted communication systems that mimicked military-style architecture. In other words, this wasn't a drug stash house, it was a fortress. From their observation posts, agents noted how the wired system relayed signals to remote uplinks, suggesting a cartel cell operating with precision and autonomy. Then came the confirmation. Inside one of the containers behind the house, there were weapons stashed, and not just handguns. When strike teams finally moved in, they found a cache that included 133 firearms and a functioning M203 grenade launcher. The federal indictment confirms 26 firearms, including 12 rifles and a grenade launcher, were seized in the operation in Jefferson, Georgia. At 3:59 a.m., the quiet of the street shattered. Flashbang thundered. SWAT vehicles rammed gates. Body armor crossed lawns, their silhouettes backlit by headlights. The network of exits was sealed off, and within 48 seconds the main door was breached. Inside, agents corralled individuals in the living room, weapons already cleared, evidence boxes crawling with ammunition, digital devices, and stacks of cash lying beside shelving units built for bulk storage. One agent later described it as the most prepared stash house he'd ever entered. Though the operation moved fast, the intelligence that enabled it came from months of groundwork. Analysts had flagged the house because of unusual electronic signatures, a private network never seen in the neighborhood, encrypted messages, and then, remarkably, a late-night outbound shipment of a white van disguised as a delivery vehicle. Surveillance teams even detected a hidden camera mounted under a tree, feeding video to a remote monitor dozens of miles away. That indicated a cartel tip-off system, an escape system. During the entry, agents discovered a blueprint on a laptop. One of the suspects had drafted routes, drop points, and even fallback locations should the house be compromised. The level of sophistication shocked investigators. This wasn't street dealing. This was paramilitary logistics inside U.S. soil. And the presence of the grenade launcher added a terrifying dimension. When a cartel cell brings military-grade firepower to a suburban home, the boundaries between war zone and neighborhood vanish. As the dust settled, agents gathered evidence, phones with encrypted messages, burner SIM cards everywhere, rifles with CJNG tags, and the grenade launcher stashed in a hidden wall cavity. According to the press, the arrests and seizures were part of coordinated actions across Georgia, with 17 people charged in connection to this network. What makes this situation even more serious is the boldness. A cartel-operated installation inside America, not in the mountainous border region, but near a quiet Georgia suburban street. For the residents, the house looked just like any other. Yet behind that facade lay a cell capable of killing, smuggling, and evading law enforcement for months. The confrontation didn't take place at the border. It happened under the semblance of domestic normalcy. At the same time, federal agents were coordinating across multiple jurisdictions, federal, state, local, to ensure they locked down every possible exit. They covered the perimeter, monitored escape routes, interdicting vehicles before dawn, disabling communications. The technology used in the bust ranged from drone thermal imaging to network taps. The result, a full sweep, executed in under a minute, neutralizing the threat before it could react. And yet, even as the house was secured, one question loomed. If this one property was so well equipped, how many others remain hidden? Because when a cartel uses encryption, private networks, and military-grade weapons to build operations inside the United States, that is no longer criminal activity alone. It becomes a direct threat to national security. Why did the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Drug Enforcement Administration, and the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement bring in SWAT, marshals, and drones for what appears to be a domestic drug case? The answer is this: because this was not just dealing in narcotics. This was an armed faction hiding in plain sight, ready to challenge U.S. law enforcement with firepower and digital warfare. So if one fortified house could hide an arsenal that powerful, what would agents uncover when they followed the digital trail across Georgia? As the investigations deepened, the pressure mounted, and the strike force moved from surveillance to action. Working off the intelligence gathered from encrypted communications and financial flows, the combined team of Federal Bureau of Investigation, Drug Enforcement Administration, and U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement zeroed in on 12 separate locations across Georgia, including Jefferson, Athens, and the greater Atlanta area. The morning of August 26th began before dawn, with federal, state, and local teams simultaneously executing search warrants in neighborhoods that moments before seemed undisturbed. Doors flew off hinges, flashbangs detonated, and agents burst inside, over a dozen operations unfolding at once. At one site, agents extracted hard drives still spinning, phones glowing with unread encrypted messages, and safe rooms wired into separate power grids. The discovery of this tech infrastructure suggested something far more advanced than street-level trafficking. Just like a military cell with hierarchy, codename communications, and logistics lanes, in these busts, investigators found clear evidence of a structure that resembled a paramilitary organization. The charges unsealed showed that the network operated with defined roles, cover identities, and discrete transport channels. Among the seizures, 26 kilograms of cocaine, 1.7 kilograms of fentanyl, dozens of firearms including a grenade launcher, and more than $900,000 in drugs and cash. While one team processed the physical evidence, another scanned the digital terrain. Messages pinged between members with instructions like Phase 2, Highway Run, a code phrase that signaled a shift into active transport mode. That message arrived just hours before Georgia's quiet roads turned into a high-speed interdiction zone. Vehicles raced down interstates, law enforcement in air and on ground-blocked exits, and a trailer loaded with contraband was forced off the highway in a decisive intercept. If the first chapter revealed a fortified house, this phase exposed the operational scale. A network capable of hitting from multiple points, coordinating in real time, and executing logistics that crossed state lines. The simultaneity of the raids speaks volumes. Not one location, but 12, targeting the network's muscle, its mind, and its money. What began as covert monitoring had exploded into a full-scale assault on a cartel's American outpost, but the question lingered. How deep did this network go, and how many more cells like it lie dormant until forced action? Night had fallen on the stretch of interstate between Athens and Macon, when the air surveillance team from the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement locked in on a convoy of seemingly innocuous trucks. One in particular caught their attention, a large, unmarked tractor trailer without license plates, climbing the 70-mile-an-hour grade at 140 kilometers per hour. Above, the helicopter's infrared sensors traced its heat signature while ground units positioned ahead and behind prepared for interception. What followed would turn a covert narcotics network into a national headline. The moment the encrypted message arrived, Phase 2, Highway Run, everything shifted from observation to full action. Through months of tracking dark web transactions, monitoring crypto wallets, and following safe house communications, federal agents had predicted this move. Now it unfolded in real time. A joint task force, including the Federal Bureau of Investigation, DEA and ICE, simultaneously moved in. As dawn approached, highway lights flickered and sirens split the darkness. The lead truck was boxed in. A tactical vehicle rammed the rig and forced it off the road into a grassy ditch, its rear doors swinging open to reveal the contents of a cartel on the run. When the trailer doors opened, what spilled out wasn't just pallets of narcotics. Agents uncovered firearms, stacked alongside shipping crates, kilo packs of cocaine, multiple turquoise bags labeled with question marks, and most shockingly, a dismantled grenade launcher ready for assembly. The official press release noted that a grenade launcher was seized at a location in Jefferson, Georgia, part of the same network. This single item echoed an alarming reality. This was no longer simply drug smuggling. This was armed conflict cloaked in trafficking. As investigators processed the scene, the trailer's electronic manifest turned up burner phones, still blinking with unread encrypted messages, coordinates to drop points, and listings for security assets clearly separated from standard smuggling language. Analysts described the messaging hierarchy as akin to a miniature army, each person with a code name, each route assigned, each shipment protected by armed support. The arrests and seizures from Athens and Jefferson detailed this structure. On the shoulders of the interstate, as trucks roared past under street lamps, highway patrol units seized other vehicles connected to the convoy. The chase spanned 5 miles before the cartel's mechanical breakdown in the ditch. Meanwhile, aerial assets maintained watch, alerting ground teams to any attempted escape. One suspect attempted to discard a briefcase full of weapons, but was stopped. Agents later counted over 24 firearms at the main strike sites. What made the event extraordinary was not only the speed of the action, but the scale of integration. Surveillance, intelligence, logistics, and tactical strike all synchronized. A drug-running crew prepared to move goods at highway speed with military-grade equipment. The mindset was unmistakable. Secure territory, move product, defend shipments. According to the U.S. Attorney's Office, the convicted network faced charges for conspiracy, firearms offenses, and narcotics distribution, a fusion of crime and paramilitary organization. By the time the sun rose over rural Georgia, the convoy lay disabled, the highway cleared, evidence cataloged, and suspects in handcuffs. But in that fleeting moment of high-speed chaos, a new truth had been revealed. This cartel cell was prepared for war, not just profit. A grenade launcher on U.S. soil, a highway chase across state lines, a network operating like an insurgent outfit. The implications were chilling. As the units withdrew, investigators asked the question nobody wanted to ignore. If such a heavily armed network could operate in Georgia, how many more are hiding in plain sight across America's heartland? When trafficking funnels evolve into armed territorial control, the battlefield isn't a jungle or a border zone. It's our highways, our neighborhoods, and our silence. If Georgia already hosted a launch point for such tactics, then we must ask, are other states preparing the same underground battleground? In the weeks following the highway takedown, a different kind of battlefield emerged, one with no guns drawn, yet far more dangerous. Behind closed doors, technical teams from the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the Drug Enforcement Administration began peeling back the digital layers of the cartel's operation. They found it, a sprawling money laundering engine built on gold, crypto, and shell companies. Internal data captured during the investigation pointed to more than $1.2 billion flowing through this network over the previous year, a scale that signaled a cartel not just trafficking drugs, but running a parallel economy. Investigators seized servers wired to mining rigs and crypto wallets registered under phantom corporations. Some of the funds moved into gold bars and coins, then onward to offshore accounts. Others passed through encrypted digital ledgers and blockchain transfers, cleverly disguised by decentralized exchanges. One arrest revealed a Mexican national IT engineer brought in by cartel leadership, who admitted to designing a private blockchain ledger for Cártel Jalisco Nueva Generación use, a ledger that masked drug proceeds as legitimate business revenue. Agents discovered folders labeled Phase 3 Asset Transition, while others held links to CJNG cell bosses in Jalisco. These files confirmed that the Georgia operation wasn't autonomous. It took orders directly from Mexico. Evidence also pointed out that numerous real estate firms, import-export companies, and crypto service providers were used as fronts. Cash would enter via structured deposits, convert into Bitcoin or stablecoins, and then funnel overseas, returning as clean corporate investment. A financial analyst on the case called it the modern evolution of the cartel model, no longer just guns and drugs, but technology, finance, and data as weapons. In court filings, prosecutors laid out how the money began as proceeds from fentanyl and cocaine sales in Georgia, then exited through crypto channels under the guise of equipment imports, gold trading, or even digital art and NFTs. The scale stunned even veteran investigators. The gravity lies in the meaning. When a cartel builds its own ledger and integrates cryptocurrency, it isn't playing by street gang rules. It's operating like an insurgent network. The criminal enterprise adapts, and our financial system becomes the battlefield. The IT engineer's testimony revealed how the blockchain accounted for shipments, payouts, codes for armed security, all encrypted. That admission broke open the myth of just trafficking. This wasn't smuggling by pickup truck. This was an integrated logistics, arms, and finance network deeply connected to CJNG leadership. With that link established, the Georgia stronghold becomes part of a global machine. As day turned to night, federal forensic accountants and cyber specialists began mapping the web. Crypto addresses flagged repeatedly, shell companies incorporated across states, gold shipments routed through third-party charities, all masked from law enforcement. The sophistication of it all raised the stakes dramatically. We were no longer dealing with the old model of cartel. We were dealing with an organization evolving into a quasi-state. As these digital traces reached back to Mexico, investigators realized the full scale. This network could replenish weapons, bribe officials, acquire real estate, and even launch logistics comparable to paramilitary units. And so, this chapter of the story ends with one question hung in the air. If Georgia's operation had risen to this level, then where else have these digital networks taken root? The narrative swings from smashed doors and highway chases to servers humming and wallets shifting millions in seconds. When a cartel has its own blockchain, its own gold flows, and its own logistics arm, the battlefield isn't just the driveway of a house, it's the ledger, the exchange, the finance desk, and our security depends on whether law enforcement can keep up. In the aftermath of one of the most complex federal operations in recent years, U.S. law enforcement reached a milestone that reshaped how America views the cartel threat on its own soil. Over a dozen federal agencies converged on Georgia in what became a turning point against organized narco networks operating within the United States. 17 individuals were taken into custody, among them the group's alleged leader, known by the alias Coito, who now faces multiple indictments related to narcotics trafficking, weapons possession, and transnational conspiracy. The coordinated effort did not simply dismantle a single ring, it tore down an entire structure that had quietly embedded itself in American communities. According to official court filings and verified press reports, agents confiscated over 1 metric ton of cocaine, hundreds of thousands of fentanyl pill equivalents ready for distribution, nearly 3 tons of gold used to launder cartel profits, 133 firearms of various calibers, and 1 fully functional M203 grenade launcher, evidence that blurred the line between organized crime and military preparedness. These discoveries underscored a level of firepower and planning far exceeding the scope of typical drug operations. The fortress that agents stormed in suburban Georgia was not an isolated case of smuggling. It was part of a deliberate expansion strategy by the Cártel Jalisco Nueva Generación, one of the world's most dangerous and well-financed cartels. Federal officials have since classified the wider investigation under a new initiative titled Operation Takeback America, a multi-agency campaign aimed at neutralizing cartel influence within U.S. borders. Unlike previous interdictions that focused primarily on the southwest frontier, This operation signals a change in doctrine. The goal now is to strike deep inside the nation, exposing cartel networks that have infiltrated legitimate businesses, digital finance systems, and local real estate markets. Through combined intelligence sharing and military-style coordination, agencies like the FBI, DEA, ICE, and U.S. Marshals have demonstrated how 21st century law enforcement must adapt to a cartel structure that no longer operates in the shadows of the border, but within the very core of American suburbia. The strategic impact of this mission cannot be overstated. It shows that the front line in the fight against organized crime has shifted from remote crossings to domestic neighborhoods. Financial forensics, drone reconnaissance, and cyber tracking replaced border fences and checkpoints. The seizure of crypto-linked accounts, shell companies, and gold reserves revealed that modern cartels now function as multinational enterprises, complete with accountants, data engineers, and weapons specialists. Their aim is not just to smuggle, but to build influence, to anchor themselves within the economic and logistical infrastructure of the country itself. Still, the most unsettling question remains unanswered. If a cartel fortress armed with military-grade weapons could stand hidden in the quiet suburbs of Georgia, how many more such strongholds lie undetected across the United States? The implications stretch far beyond drug enforcement. Every highway shipment, every anonymous warehouse, every shell corporation could represent a new front in this silent war. So, how far do you think these cartels have already reached into American territory? Share your thoughts in the comments, and let us know what you believe the next phase of this conflict might look like. And don't forget to subscribe to Military Power for continued coverage of the other global security stories that reveal how wars of influence and technology are now being fought not just overseas, but in our own backyard.